Peter B. Collins, News and Comments. Thanks for clicking here. It's Monday, May 1st, 2017, May Day, as workers around the world take to the streets, including right here in the good old USA. Protesting wages, working conditions, and authoritarian governments. This is a street scene from Istanbul, Turkey. And I credit Vice News as the source of this video. I'm watching a group of journalists with cameras run along, and they are followed by a helmeted individual in military attire with a video camera. And in Turkey today, with the strongman, almost dictator Erdogan, even more powerful than before as a result of the recent referendum, which has been challenged for the way it was conducted, and the outcome is considered a possible theft. And I'm being polite about that. It's pretty clear to me that that election was not fair or free. But in Turkey today, responding to a further crackdown over the weekend, we see that hundreds of people have been arrested, and there is really the threat of further violence in Turkey. And this comes after, of course, over the weekend, Erdogan initiated another purge. Some 4,000 public officials were purged and expelled from the government on Saturday. And this adds to 140,000 people who've been expelled from the country. Over 100,000 people who have lost their jobs as teachers or government workers. And this all comes from alleged affinities for Fethullah Gulen, the exiled Turkish imam and media mogul who lives in Pennsylvania, perhaps under CIA protection. But this crackdown has really been massive. At this point, we're told there are at least 120 journalists who are behind bars, many who've been held for months. 173 newspapers have been shut down. More than 2,500 journalists have been fired along with those shutdowns. And here's where it gets weird. Now, I've been to Turkey, but I didn't watch daytime TV. I was busy being a tourist. But what is described as a staple of Turkish daytime TV are dating shows. They're described as hugely popular. The government has been thinking about canceling them for the last few months. Feminists find them debasing. Conservatives, Muslims, think that they profane the institution of marriage. I really can't judge. But, you know, we've got a lot of dreck on our TV channels. I don't see the government moving to take any of that stuff away from us. Now, here in the United States, we did have some pretty large climate marches in Washington and elsewhere around the country over the weekend. And today, people are taking to the streets. I know there is a protest in San Francisco that's underway right now. And here in Marin County, which is pretty lily-white and upscale, there is a march that is underway heading in my direction right now. Violence also broke out in Paris, and this is just 1 week before the runoff presidential election will be taking place. A few hundred protesters threw gasoline bombs and other objects after a relatively peaceful union march in Paris today. There was tear gas and some billy clubs were used. Riot police clubbed some protesters who were pushed up against a wall. In Cuba, a protester briefly disrupted the start of their annual May Day march, which is heavily secured. We're told that there are police officers who man the entire line of the march. But one person got out there with an American flag before being tackled and dragged away. 2 May Day marches were held in Moscow. A crowd estimated at 130,000 paraded across the cobblestones of Red Square. The second march was led by communists who over the years have tried to keep the May Day tradition alive. They had a few thousand people, and they circled or skirted Red Square. In Spain, 2 major unions called for marches in over 70 cities. In Poland, labor union and left-wing activists appealed for unity. and they had a major march in Warsaw today. In Cambodia, riot police watch carefully as more than 1,000 garment workers defied a government ban on marching to deliver a petition to the National Assembly in Phnom Penh. Several thousand protesters gathered outside Greece's parliament, and they braced for more austerity measures to be imposed, as if Greece has not become austere enough. A few thousand left-wing activists in Manila and laborers marched and held noisy rallies to press for higher wages and an end to temporary contractual jobs. If I were protesting in Manila, I would also be protesting the extrajudicial killings under President Rodrigo Duterte. And there are a few other marches, too, Bangladesh, Germany, and Taiwan. And I think that there is a real boiling point that we are reaching, maybe not a tipping point, maybe not a breaking point, but a boiling point where the income and wealth inequality compounded by totalitarian governments and even those that pretend to be democracies are becoming more nationalist and more authoritarian. I think it's worth a minute here to consider the message that these protesters are sending. And meanwhile, Trump, who has proven that he's pretty cozy with most dictators, he hosted General al-Sisi from Egypt recently at the White House and had no criticism for the way he has cracked down brutally in Cairo and around the rest of the country in Egypt. And, of course, Trump is also a big fan of Erdogan in Turkey that we mentioned just a moment ago. And over the weekend, he had what he described as a very friendly conversation with the new Philippine strongman, Duterte. He invited him to the White House. Based on the notes released by the press room, there was no commentary on the thousands of people who've been executed without trial, some by vigilantes, some by uniformed police officers, for merely being suspected of using drugs or being part of drug distribution in the Philippines. And Trump apparently doesn't see any problem with that. He might like to get some of that police state action going for himself here. And he also, and this is a stunner, all right, he has now said that he would be honored to meet with Kim Jong-un. Now, he's been saying nice things about him. On Friday, he told Reuters, oh, gosh, he's 27 years old. His father died, took over a regime. Say what you want, but that's not easy. Now, this could be part of Trump's attempt at subterfuge, trying to sucker punch or suck in Kim Jong-un to the Trump orbit, and they can compare hairstyles and things like that. So it is just bizarre. Trump went on to say, I'm not giving him credit or not giving him credit. I'm just saying that's a very hard thing to do, which is, in fact, giving him credit. And he later said, kind of modifying his comments, if it would be appropriate for me to meet with him, I would absolutely. I'd be honored to do it. Most political people would never say that, but I'm telling you, under the right circumstances, I would meet with him. We have breaking news. Well, I think you broke wind more than you broke news, because, as I commented on Friday, this idea of the U.S. getting into bilateral, just direct talks with the government of North Korea is fraught with risk and danger. And Trump appears to be oblivious to this, even after the history lesson that Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, gave him over that chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago recently. And it's very, I think, dicey for the U.S. to attempt to deal directly with North Korea because we don't have that much leverage. We don't have any trade, any bilateral relations at all with North Korea. And so there is very little we can do to leverage a non-existent relationship and try to achieve the diplomatic or security goals that Trump has kind of blathered about. So I think not only his admiration for these dictators, but his willingness to really dispense with the protocols and recognition of the complexities of these kinds of talks where he thinks, come on, just let me at him. I'll get a deal. It's not that simple. and we thought he was learning something from his setbacks in the first 100 days. Well, there won't be a government shutdown. Over this past weekend, Republicans and Democrats have made deals, and they're wheeling and dealing without the art of the deal author really getting anything out of it that he wants. So Trump, asked for money for the border wall. They wrote in some additional spending, $1.5 billion for border security, but it's written very explicitly that that money can't be used to start the wall, and that other funds in the immigration and related budgets can also not be used to build a wall. In addition, he asked for a whole lot of money for the military, and $54 billion was the number he floated. He got $18 billion. And the Democrats really seem to be playing not only some pretty good defense, but they've gotten the Republicans to split over the Trump agenda, whatever that is. And I heard Rush Limbaugh whining and bleating on the radio this morning because the Republicans really feel snookered by this. And in many cases, they have been. Trump wanted to cut funding for the National Institutes of Health. This bill increases it by $2 billion. He was kind of on the fence about the money for retired miners after the coal companies walked away from their obligations to pensions and health benefits for the sick miners. And the budget includes $4.6 billion to cover those costs for the foreseeable future, if not in some sort of perpetuity. So this is a very interesting development. Now, to be fair, I think that the Democrats are not so shrewd. They are simply benefiting from the infighting among Republicans. And Nancy Pelosi was able to say that, the deal is a sharp contrast to Trump's dangerous plans to steal billions from life-saving medical research. She expressed relief that the bill would not pay for an immoral and unwise border wall or create a cruel new deportation force. Now, the Democrats may be celebrating too soon. The big budget, of course, for the following year is going to be negotiated over the summer and hopefully passed before October 1st when the fiscal year starts. And you can expect these same skirmishes to resurface. But this interesting piece from the Washington Post, 8 ways that Trump got rolled. Number 1, there are explicit restrictions to block the border wall. I mentioned that. Non-defense domestic spending will go up, even though Trump's blueprint said that that wouldn't happen. The only increase was going to be for security on the border and the Pentagon. So let's see. The Pelosi made sure that she got $295 million to shore up Medicaid in Puerto Rico. Schumer got $61 million to reimburse local law enforcement agencies for the cost of security for Trump, specifically in New York and in Florida. The cancer moonshot that was started by Obama and presided over by Vice President Biden got a raise, a $2 billion boost. Well, that's part of the entire NIH package. I don't want to mislead you that all that is for the cancer research. But there were other setbacks. The defunding of Planned Parenthood is not in this package. The EPA was supposed to have its budget cut by 30%, but this deal trims it by 1%. Democrats say that they forced Republicans to withdraw more than 160 different amendments that were, not satisfying to the Democrats. And so the other issue is, and this is one we have to be very careful about, it says here, to keep negotiations moving, the White House already agreed to continue paying Obamacare subsidies. Now, this is something that I think could change on a dime. And we have to be very careful because Trump is not somebody who is really a man of his word, and we'll get to his own comment about that in just a moment. So this is an interesting stage here where Trump is even buying TV ads to try to burnish his image and brag about his alleged achievements in the first 100 days. But when you look at it, and if you use this deal over the short-term budget bill as a barometer, he's not winning. We're not necessarily winning either. but we are seeing blocks to the worst of the worst. Now, the Trumper seems to be a little confused because one of his assistants said, hey, maybe we'll get a vote on Obamacare repeal this week. And Trump went on the Sunday TV shows and said he's hoping for that. But he seems to be a little confused about what his colleagues on the Hill are proposing, because he told Face the Nation, or Deface the Nation, as he nicknamed it, yesterday on CBS, pre-existing conditions are in the bill, and I mandate it. I said, has to be. Well, unfortunately, it's not in the bill. There is language that appears to say that, but it is basically undermined by other language. So, Representative Chris Collins of New York said Republicans were not planning to seek a new cost and impact estimate from the Congressional Budget Office. So they're going to drive into this blind. But the amendment that he wrote basically says here, and let me correct myself. The amendment was actually offered by Tom MacArthur, a Republican of New Jersey. And the language says, nothing in this act shall be construed as permitting health insurance issuers to limit access to health coverage for individuals with pre-existing conditions. But take this, in another amendment to the bill, the federal government can grant waivers allowing insurers to consider health status as a factor in setting rates. So sure, you got pre-existing conditions, cancer, brain damage, I mean, your liver's falling out. They won't deny you coverage because of the pre-existing conditions. They're just going to offer you insurance at rates that you could never afford, which is, in my view, the same as allowing insurers to deny coverage over pre-existing conditions. So Trump seems to be a little lost in the fog there, and maybe somebody can tap him on the shoulder and try to straighten him out. Later in that Deface the Nation interview, just before he abruptly cut it off, John Dickerson was asking Trump about his tweets blaming Obama for wiretapping the Trump campaign. And in those tweets, he called Obama sick and bad. And Dickerson was asking Trump, hey, do you still have a good relationship with Obama? And he said, well, he was very nice to me with words, and when I was with him. But after that, there has been no relationship. Dickerson. But you stand by that claim about him? Trump. I don't stand by anything. Let me repeat that. I don't stand by anything. You can take it the way you want. I think our side's been proven very strongly, and everybody's talking about it. Frankly, it should be discussed. I think it's a very big surveillance of our citizens, whatever that means. It's a very big topic, and it's a topic that should be number one, and we should find out what the hell is going on. Now, that's a crazy bunch of jumbled thoughts. Dickerson, trying to straighten this out, said, I just wanted to find out, though. You're the President of the United States. You said he was sick and bad because he had tapped you. You can take any way. You can take it any way you want, says Trump. Dickerson, but I'm asking you because you don't want it to be Trump. You don't fake news, says Dickerson. I want to hear it from, you don't have to. So they kept interrupting each other. And then Trump just got fed up and abruptly ended the interview. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscription dollars. Just recently, Mark Shapiro renewed his annual subscription. Gracias, Mark. Anna Gordonier, Mona Kobus, Brian Mazzi, they're all monthly subscribers to the PBC Podcast, and I'd like you to join them. Come on over to the website, peterbcollins.com, find the menu button, upper right or somewhere on your screen, and you click on that, pull it down. It leads you to become a subscriber, the sign-up page, and that's where our bonus books are displayed. I haven't had a chance yet to update the bonus book page with Tom Frank's Listen Liberal, but I've got a handful of copies for new annual subscribers who give me a mailing address in the continental U.S. The Pentagon is admitting that at least 45 civilians were killed by U.S. air raids in Iraq and Syria during the month of March. And that does not include findings from the ongoing investigation into the March 17th hit in Mosul, where at least 100 civilians were killed. So already they're massaging the data to try to keep the numbers down. The Pentagon does admit that at least 350 civilians have been killed by coalition strikes in Iraq and Syria since 2014. But they're always trying to spin these numbers down and claim that, anybody who hasn't been completely identified as a civilian is a militant, and we know how this game is played. Meanwhile, with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the West Bank Palestinians, scheduled to meet President Trump on Wednesday at the White House, the opposition group, the group called Hamas that runs the Gaza Strip, they seem to be moderating some of their public comments. A new document of principles calls for closer ties to Egypt, waters down the anti-Semitic language that is prominent in the Hamas charter, and accepts at least a provisional Palestinian state. And this appears to be an indication, says the New York Times, of the widening split between Hamas and the Fatah government that runs the West Bank. And, of course, this splinter was engineered by the Bush administration when they insisted on, I think it was in 2005 or 2006, that elections go forward in Gaza, even after there were serious issues raised about the legitimacy of the election and the likelihood that Hamas would win it. And after that, Israel and the U.S. did everything they could to delegitimize the freely elected government of the Gaza Strip, just like we did later in Egypt. So this new document calls for Hamas to distance itself from the Muslim Brotherhood. It reiterates the view of Hamas leadership that it's open to a Palestinian state along the 1967 borders. And it specifically weakens language from its 1988 charter, proclaiming Jews as enemies and comparing their views to Nazism, though the new document does not replace the original charter. So I think they're trying to indicate some flexibility and try to set the stage for negotiations. And as of today, the hunger strike led by Marwan Barghouti in the Israeli jails, where hundreds of Palestinians have been rejecting food, it moves into its third week today. Over at Shadowproof, Kevin Gostola's got a great story about Jeffrey Sterling, the imprisoned CIA whistleblower. And Sterling, who is serving his sentence, he's going to be released, if all goes well, before the end of this year. He's at the Federal Correctional Institute in Englewood, Colorado. And Sterling, through his wife, describes that recently he got into a beef with a guard where the guard was threatening him, and it doesn't appear that Sterling did anything wrong, but he ended up being sent to solitary confinement, and they wouldn't give him his medications. He's got serious heart issues. And according to his wife, this led to a couple of medical events while he was in solitary. I believe that he has been released as of today. But it's just really sad to see this kind of brutal treatment. And because this is Jeffrey Sterling, a man who has made the news, we're hearing about it. But there are thousands of prisoners who are abused by guards and sent to solitary, let me say at least every week, if not every day, across this country. And also from Shadowproof, coverage of a situation in Chicago going back to the end of March. A family man who had been injured badly in a drive-by shooting in Chicago just a couple of months ago was picked up by Immigration and Customs Enforcement and brutally arrested. He was slammed to the ground by 6 unidentified ICE agents who forced entry into his home, and he was whisked away to a correctional facility where he is being denied necessary medical care. Now, as I mentioned, back in January, this man, whose name is Katalin Ramirez, was leaving a restaurant in it looks like on the south side of Chicago, as a drive-by shooting occurred. He was hit by multiple bullets, fractured the right side of his skull, right shoulder, traumatic brain injury, and he was hustled away without some of the equipment that he needs, like special medications, and also just like an ankle brace and other things that he needs just to walk. And he currently cannot bathe, feed, or dress himself properly, but he is languishing in a federal lockup. The Supreme Court seems poised to take up an interesting question about the advancements in computer technology and artificial intelligence. And the question that may come before them is, can you use secret software, artificial intelligence, to prepare for a sentencing judge the recommended sentence based on the many factors and the legal issues that go into devising the actual sentence? Now, this certainly might save judges a lot of time. But we're learning that the software that runs this artificial intelligence system is considered proprietary by the company that makes it, and they won't reveal it to defense attorneys or even to the judge his or herself. That should be him or herself. And so Chief Justice Roberts, who was making a public appearance at Rensselaer Polytech near Albany, he was asked about this, and he said, well, this is a wave of the future. It's already happening. And so the court has accepted a case coming from Wisconsin, the case of Eric Loomis, who was sentenced to 6 years in prison based in part on proprietary software. He says his right to due process was violated by a judge's consideration of a report generated by the secret algorithm. And I agree. I don't think this should be secret. I think it should be discoverable by prosecution and the judge, yes, and even the defense. My San Francisco Chronicle finally realized that Dianne Feinstein should step down. And this is the newspaper that endorsed her for re-election in 2012 without raising any issues about what she had done in her first 3 terms as senator or what she was planning to do in the 4th. But they commissioned Larry Gersten, a guy I know who's a retired political science professor from San Jose State, and he penned a column. I'm linking to it in the show file for this podcast. And her politics, he notes, and again, he and the Chronicle are coming to these determinations way late. It reads, when first elected, Feinstein ran and behaved as a moderate, refusing to move closer to the liberal edge of the party. Such an attitude was acceptable then, that would have been during the Clinton 90s, but today Democrats in California tend to be much more liberal than Feinstein. She has particular exposure on environmental issues, where she has consistently favored the needs of California's farmers over those who seek to minimize artificial redirection of water. She's been slow to criticize Trump. Simply put, Feinstein is now and has been for several years out of step with the core of the state's Democratic Party. And let me explain why I feel so strongly that this is accurate. It's just too late. That is, in the year 2000, I went to work on the campaign of a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate here in California. It's the only time I've ever worked for a Republican, and I've worked on many campaigns, including for Nancy Pelosi back in the 90s. I work as a media consultant and advisor. And Tom Campbell, who challenged Dianne Feinstein from her left on many issues as a Republican, is a man who I knew and respected, and when he decided to challenge Feinstein, I offered to help, and he hired me. And it was fun. We pretty well knew we weren't going to pull off an upset. The Republicans only gave Tom Campbell a few $1 million for a statewide campaign against Feinstein, who at that point was really hogging the middle of the political road. But that was the point where I took my position, that Feinstein was out of touch with California voters. And I'm glad that others are finally coming to that sensibility. And finally today, I've spent a little time talking about this deal that Barack Obama has made to accept a $400,000 speaking fee from Cantor Fitzgerald, the Wall Street firm. And the New York Times used his own words against him in an editorial published today. It quoted from The Audacity of Hope. I know that as a consequence of my fundraising, I became more like the wealthy donors I met. I spent more and more of my time above the fray, outside the world of immediate hunger, disappointment, fear, irrationality, and frequent hardship of the people that I'd entered public life to serve. And in the voice of the editorial page, Is it a betrayal of that sentiment for the former president to have accepted a reported $400,000 to speak to a Wall Street firm? Well, then they go in the wrong direction. They say, perhaps not. But look at this. Michelle and Barack Obama have already signed a contract for $65 million to write a book each. They don't need the $400,000, and this is a real blemish on his reputation. It continually reminds us that he didn't prosecute any Wall Street bankers. He accepted settlements that shareholders paid for. But, you know, Jamie Dimon, you name your favorite Wall Street wolf, and tell me what price they paid for their wrongdoing during the administration of Barack Obama. The Times goes on to say that, at minimum, Obama should stay true to his values by giving his speech fees to his foundation or other charities focused on that goal. And they note that a poll released last week shows that more than two-thirds of voters, including nearly half of Democrats, say the Democratic Party is out of touch. Yes, indeed. The Democratic Party is way out of touch, and its leaders seem quite committed to keeping it that way. I'm Peter B. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast all the way to the end here. You can find it every day on YouTube.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.